Hey everyone, welcome back to Tuesday Tea with me, Alisha Bowker Mudrock. Today we have one of my favorite people ever on our show with us today. This is Nora. We have been friends for forever, it seems like, but I've known her through many states in many moves. We serendipitously lived in New York together and then ended up back in Louisville. Her husband married my husband and I, like just very close with her. But aside from being a great friend, she is a brilliant therapist. She works with trauma with children. She's also a positive discipline educator, just has two of her own, very, very knowledgeable in all the things. And she's a delicious baker and amazing chef. So if she ever invites you over for food, say yes, don't even think about it. And has a great, palate for other beverages to go with the foods as well. So we've spent many a nights eating and drinking and laughing. But we have her today to really talk to us about living in alignment and getting clear on our values and some just conversation around that topic. And I thought she was perfect for this conversation. So kind of pass it over to her to get started. But we're so thankful to have you and welcome.
Thank you. I'm so humbled by that kind introduction. And it's so fun to be able to do this together as we've known each other so long and then kind of like been alongside each other professionally.
Yes,
It's awesome.
personally, professionally, all the things.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I'll say is about the email I sent you when you first asked me to do this, where I was like, why did you think of me for this? Because my initial reaction was like, I don't know anything about living in alignment with my values. And then I thought about it and I was like, oh, wait, actually, this is something that's really important to me. And this
Yes.
is something that I feel like I do a lot,
Mhm.
but I just haven't necessarily, it's more of an emotional and gut thing for me.
Mhm.
And I don't
Mhm.
necessarily bring it up to my thinking,
Mhm.
outline it for myself. And so I will say it was really helpful to me to kind of reflect on this and prepare for this because
Oh,
I feel like I made a lot of connections about stuff that I hadn't thought about
right. You just kinda
before.
do intrinsically.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things I will say one of the tools that I used that I found most helpful, and I'd done this maybe a year ago. My husband did this exercise for his job, and I kind of
Mhm.
hopped on and did it for fun. But Brene Brown, who is, social work queen,
Yeah.
has a living in your values worksheet that you can get for free online at her website.
Mhm.
Um, and she has an amazing list of values and kind of, some things to reflect on along with that. But her big thing is you really have to pick two, maybe even just one.
Mhm. Wow.
Um, and that when most of us look at lists of values, we see things like, family, love, kindness, curiosity, courage, like stuff that, I
Mhm.
mean, I would imagine any one of us at first glance on that would pick 15 things
Right. Like, all
are
those
important
seem
to
important.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the really hard things about this is winnowing down what is actually most important. What are the values that you sort of filter all other values through? Um,
Mhm.
which is a big challenge. And I'm doing something a little funny because I thought I meant to get it out before I talk to you. I usually keep it in my drawer right here. I have a beautiful deck that I use with clients. That's this gorgeous card deck called Living Within Your Values. And it has like maybe 150 cards.
Mhm.
They're all illustrated really beautifully, and each one
Really?
has tips for how to live into the value on back of it. So I'll send you the link in case you want to
Okay. Yeah.
post it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because I would have to really dig in this messy desk to find it. But so there are tools like a card deck or looking at a list or that thing from Brene Brown that are helpful.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think a lot of what comes back to values for me and exploring values and thinking about what yours are is how do you filter out the external noise and the expectations from other people from
Mhm.
what you know inside to feel true for you.
Mhm.
And we're often not taught how to do that. And women especially aren't taught how to do that. We're
Right.
taught how to be
Ignore that.
exactly what everyone else wants us to be.
Right, right.
And so there's been this thing, and I think for me, parenthood was something that really clarified it. But any big life transition has kind of brought me closer to, every time I move or have to make a new
Mhm,
friend or go through a career change,
mhm.
you kind of have to start filtering out some of that noise,
Yeah.
you know, and thinking about, okay, why do I feel like I need to be doing this thing? Or why do I
Mhm.
feel like I need to be living my life in this way? Is it what I actually want and what I actually believe? Or is it just what I feel like is expected of me?
Right. And I think with that, we can't know if we're living in alignment or working towards that true, vision of us and whatever that looks like if we're not clear on our values. Because
Mhm,
but then it's also, can you really set the goals or see the future you without like, I think we need them both, and it's like the chicken or the egg, but they both kind of seamlessly work together to keep us on track and to kind of keep checking in. And I think our values can sometimes shift, right? I
mhm,
don't know if they change, maybe they change super dramatically, but where it might be at the top of the list could change, right? In different seasons,
mhm,
it's not always the same. Like,
mhm,
just because I chose honesty doesn't mean it always has to be the first
mhm,
one. And I think
mhm,
that they both kind of shift together, right? As our
mhm,
vision and our a lot like our future goals and our future selves shift, sometimes
mhm.
values shift as well, I'm imagining.
Yeah, absolutely. And um I think for me, there's one that when I reflect on my life kind of going back, I'm like, oh, I think this is what I've always had.
Mhm.
And then and both of them kind of feel that way to me, but it's hard to tell whether something is just crystallized as you kind of grow
Right,
and
right.
change.
Do I know it because I know it now, or was it always there?
Right.
Like,
But I mean, the exercise is only to benefit you. So if it changes,
there's no right answer. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so, and I will share with you, I'll share with you my values, and I'm curious what if you have a sense of what yours are. So, um, one of mine I got from Brene Brown's list, and the other one I got actually this morning because I had my second one was one that hadn't been. I'd sort of been feeling like I don't know if this is really it. This doesn't. I don't get the same ring inside of me.
Mhm, mhm.
And then I thought of something that was not on the list, but that resonated for me. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is what I orient everything through. So mine, at least at this moment, are wholeheartedness and belovedness.
Mm.
Yeah. And I am a person who really values love and kindness and my relationships. And I value curiosity and education, and I value justice and social justice and
Mm,
all of that stuff.
mhm.
And I think for me right now, wholeheartedness and belovedness capture the the stuff that connects all of that.
Yeah.
Jumping into life kind of without avoiding a piece of the human experience and, you know, being present to whatever comes.
Yeah.
Uh, and being fully in relationships in all of their ugliness and
Mhm.
joy and all of the things. And
Mhm.
then belovedness for me is about really like seeing the inherent dignity that's within every person and the way that we are all
Mhm.
connected and the way that
Mhm.
we all have value and the way that I feel like I have value.
Mhm.
Um, that there's instead of it felt a little more clear to me than the idea of love, which is a little more vague.
It doesn't feel as deep or as, like, all-encompassing in the way that
Yeah.
you're describing. Yeah.
And the great thing about values is like you don't it's also individual, right?
Right.
So
Right.
what has the ring of truth? Love may fully encompass what it is for
What is it
someone
for
else.
you? 100%.
love may not make the values list, even the top 10 for another person, but that doesn't mean they
Yeah.
don't think it's
Love
important.
people. Yeah.
Right. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they don't have that in their life. It just
Yeah.
means that it's not the thing that they're filtering everything through. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, what are yours? Do you have a sense?
I think for the one word that comes to mind the most right now is authenticity.
Mm,
And
mhm.
I don't know, maybe I'm sure I have a second, but I can't choose at this moment. But
Yeah.
I think for me, especially in this season, I'm really just for myself trying to be as authentic and show up
Mhm.
the same me the most often I can in all my spaces. Obviously, like we have to adapt in small ways, a little bit more professional, a little bit more this, a little bit more that. But at the end of the day, I don't ever want to come across as I'm like 12 different people. I like you should just be like, oh yeah, that's Alisha, like across the board.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I really, really hate and have a hard time with inauthentic people. It's why
Mhm.
I really hate small talk. It's why I really hate like schmoozing. Like it just feels so fake. And it's like I'm the most social person and I'm so extrovert. But if you have to make me do like small talk, I feel drained. Like I want to die. Right. And that just like inauthentic, like this isn't what we want to talk about. Like I don't really care about that. Like I don't know. And for some people, like, oh, that's so rude or whatever else. But for me, it's like, well, I have so much energy and this is it. And I talk a lot, I listen a lot, and I don't want to waste my extra with something that it doesn't feel restorative. It doesn't feel interesting. I'm not connecting to it. I don't even think you're telling me the truth. Like,
Yeah.
so for me, there's something around that word that resonates. Where then I filter other things like how I trust people, who I love, what I want to
Mhm.
participate in, how I spend my energy. If it doesn't feel authentic to myself or if it doesn't feel authentic to someone else, like I'm really generally uninterested in participating. So,
Yeah. I mean, and knowing you and hearing you say that, none of that is a surprise. Like, it's like, oh, yeah, of course, authenticity is one of our values. That's so in line with it. Um, and I think you brought up something about kind of protecting your energy and conserving your energy. And this was something that I thought a lot about the idea of scarcity and
mm,
abundance when we were thinking about this and kind of like why does Alicia think I'm living into my values and what are my values? And because I think I think that there is this need to have this become really clear when you realize things are not limitless. If I don't
mm,
have
yeah.
infinite money, I need to prioritize where I am investing.
Yeah.
If I don't have
Yep.
infinite time, I need to
Yep.
prioritize where I'm spending it. If I, like, you know,
Yeah.
your
Anything. Right. Right.
anything. And so one of the things that I think a lot of us realize at different points in our life is that you can't do all things and be all things.
Nope.
Like you just
And it's
can't.
freeing. It's so freeing when you
Yes.
can realize that.
Yes.
It's like shocking at first and then it's super freeing. So
Exactly. Exactly. And like I am a mom of a very rambunctious 4-year-old and a 6-month-old. And so he's not quite 4, he's almost 4, but we're just
basically 4. Yeah, it's
but
like 4-year-old.
yeah, he does. Like a 14-year-old. But I do not have, if I am going to show up for my kids in the way that I believe it is important to show up for my kids, I cannot invest my time without thinking
Right,
about
thinking about that.
right. Like
Exactly.
I need reflection. And one of my spouse's friends says, like, say no with conviction so you can say yes with abandon.
I like that.
And this is something that, like, as again, I think some of it has to do with being a woman. I think some of it has to do with, who I am and the way I was raised and like the care for the people in my life. But
Mhm.
I had defaulted into saying yes all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
You
That's
ask something of me? Yes. You want me to be there? Yes. Like, this is going on? Yes, yes, yes.
mhm.
And for me, I didn't really realize the toll that had taken until the pandemic. And I was also
Mhm.
pregnant in the pandemic.
You were?
And so it was
Yes.
like the pandemic combined with like a really gnarly postpartum experience
Yes.
that honestly I had to kind of bottom out before I realized what it meant. Because you always think about saying no, and you're always like, oh yeah, I'll say no. I'm not going to say yes to everybody. But then you justify it to yourself.
Yep.
And clarifying values and where I needed to put my time and my investment
Makes it
was,
easy to say no then, because it
yeah,
doesn't make you feel bad, there's no guilt, it's just
yeah,
like, "No, this
yeah,
doesn't work for me, I don't even need to explain it to you." Like, you can have a feeling about it, I'm sad to see you're disappointed, I get that, and also moving on,
mhm,
right? But
mhm,
if you're not clear, like you're saying, there's no anchor, so then you are like, "Oh, did I do the wrong thing? Should I have? I don't know." Because
right,
someone else and I think the other thing to remember too is we don't want someone else's values ruling our lives because they're
right,
not the same. And every time you give your voice away and your power away and your yes away, you're letting someone else's values run your life. And again, it's sometimes that could be the worst case would be it's some form of like abuse or it's really detrimental and dangerous. On the best case, it's just like doesn't feel like that great because it's not yours, right? It works for them, but it's not yours. So therefore, it's like if every time you let your husband pick dinner and you liked all things, you're like, "It's fine." But it
yeah,
never felt like 100% because you really wanted Mexican food. You could eat the sushi, but you were like, "I just wanted Mexican." And so,
yeah,
like, you could live your life eating sushi and, like, it'd be fine all the time, but then you never get the Mexican and it's like, "Oh, like, the taco, that's all I wanted," right? So, it
always.
isn't bad, it's not hurting you, but it's also hurting you because it's limiting you. Your ceiling is now here because you're not thinking bigger or growing more. You're like off the path just a bit, right? Like you're not like fully there. And
Yep,
that's the problem. And that's the
yep,
reason it's important to do this work or to be thinking about these things.
yep. I'll give you an example of that is like right here next to me. So you see how I have like, you know, this is like my bookshelf and my like yoga mat and my like professional craft.
The piles.
Yeah, because and for a long time I had so much guilt and shame, and I even referred to it as my shame corner, where all the stuff gets dumped. And like values reflection and clarification is really one of those things that has let me let go of that. Like that is not putting my time and energy on clearing out the random pile of shit in the corner, like that is not in line with my values. For what?
Yep.
Appearances? So that this room that no one goes into other than me when I'm working.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that is not where I'm going to choose. That's not the highest and best use of my time.
No.
Nope. It doesn't bring me joy. In fact, I've cleaned out that corner multiple times. And you know what happens? It just looks like this
It looks
again.
like that again. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and one day that will feel different.
Yeah.
But right now, if I would be doing that at the end of the day for somebody else, I
Right.
would not be doing that for me or my family.
Right. No, and it's not even like it's helpful to that, right? It's like, yes, we
Right.
have to clean other things at time, but this is
Right.
not the thing that gets you more time with your family, that decompresses you, that makes you feel better, that spends time with your husband. Like, this is
Right.
not the thing, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And I think, that's again, it kind of goes back to that question of tuning into what is true for me and what is something that I've been told I should value.
Mm,
And
mhm. That's a big
for
one.
me, another piece that helped clarify that was a lot of the different identities and roles that I hold that on the surface level could be very contradictory.
Yeah.
Um, right? Like I am I am a mother, but I also don't think parenthood is like the best thing anyone could ever do in their lives. Like
Yeah.
I, you know, like I am a social worker who has a strong social justice lens in my practice. And I have very progressive values. And my husband is a Baptist pastor. And
Talk
yeah,
about conflict. Not like in your home, but like just those are such at odds if you thought about it in a
right,
general way, right?
Right. And
Yeah,
and they're not at odds when it comes down to what that actually looks like for me.
right,
They're not at odds, but in order to get past the surface level of, oh, I can't be those things. Like, I
right,
can't believe that if I also believe this. Like,
right.
fuck yes, you can. Like,
Yeah,
you're the link that's tying those together.
yep,
And so it can all be held. If you feel like there are two things that are important to you that feel mutually exclusive, are they really mutually exclusive or have you just been told that they are?
right. Is that really a you decision that you've come to, or is that information that you've been fed that might not be that true or needs a second look, perhaps?
Right. Exactly. And so I think kind of, there's a lot of this is the community that we're able to access and surround ourselves with. Like I have lucked
Mhm.
into, and for a long time, I did not participate in religious life meaningfully. Like I went to church with my family when I was home at Christmas and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I was definitely spiritual. Like I did Zen Buddhist meditation. I saw a shaman. I did a ton of yoga. I mean, there was a lot of spiritual activity in my life.
Yeah.
And when I started dating my husband, I wondered if these things were mutually exclusive. Like,
Mm.
I don't know if I want to jump back into, Christianity if that means this and this and this.
Right?
And I found a community of people who like helped me access knowledge and information that helped me see kind of, oh, this stuff isn't mutually exclusive. Like this all fits.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like, yes, like I am, full throated in all of my progressive values. And this is the spiritual orientation that makes me feel most connected to things bigger than myself and
Mhm.
helps more best for other people.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's kind of, I think, um, sometimes it's kind of like you get lucky. Some of this is a little bit of luck. Like it was luck that I had access to people in my life who could do that for me. But maybe it wasn't luck. I don't
Or
know.
was it that you're that in tune, you found those people?
Mm,
I mean, I think from moving a lot, I too you've also moved a lot, I know. I am very clear on who I need in my life. I need
mhm,
a friend to just, like, go to drinks with. I need, like, a
mhm,
friend that will take me more time to find that's, like, an actual friend who I, like, will tell real things to and, like, we will be never you will never not know me. I need a friend who wants to do this. I need to know someone who knows that. Like, and I believe that I've always created that everywhere I've gone. Like, yeah, I didn't like get to I don't know who that's gonna be, but I was so clear for myself, like I get lonely. I need this. I love my husband dearly, but like we cannot just stare at each other 24 hours a day, 10 days a week and never not know anyone else. Right. Like, and we both now work from home and all the things. So you have to try harder. But I think I've always manifested the communities I found because I sought them and I was very clear about like who was getting in and what energy I wanted. And I always think back to that time that we met when so I if you do know me, I do protect my energy well. And I'm not mean, but I'm very like you get here with me or you're like here. And I still remember the day that Nora, we were at work and she sat down, she's like, Alicia, I remember the day you chose to become my friend. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, don't lie. I know you chose one day. Like you acted real different. All of a sudden I was like, oh, fuck, is that obvious? But like, you're not wrong.
yeah,
Like you're not in until you're in. And when you're in, like, well, good
yeah,
luck. You're never getting rid of me. But it's, but it's like, it, but it's true. But I have to know who I want to do that with. I didn't always know that. I've wasted a lot of energy on people that weren't necessarily worth it or taught me good lessons or like aren't in my life anymore. But now it's like tight because I don't have time to be fucking around with like all these fake friendships or like friendships that are going to take from me and not give to me and deplete
mhm,
me, right? Like,
mhm,
so I would argue that you probably orchestrated that. Like you married someone who isn't your really negative taboo idea of a Baptist pastor. You married this dynamic, incredible feminist, progressive man who also is a pastor. And
mhm,
he then surrounds himself with folks who are a certain way, and in turn, you got that and you found yours. So I'd
Yeah,
say
that's
you
right.
guys like created that, whether it was
Yeah.
not that we have this much power, but like we also do have that much power, I think, so
Right. Well, and I think you're right, and it's also part of that thing of when you're living in alignment with your values, things can feel,
it comes.
yeah, it just sort of comes. And
Mhm.
I think, and there are things, I know that one of the things that we had talked about kind of thinking about was, what do you do to live in
Yeah,
alignment with your
yeah.
values? Like, how does that actually work? And it's funny because right now I feel like I'm in a place where my filter I'm 38 years old. I've had a lot of life experience. Not that I'm that old, but like, I mean, I'm still in the
No,
whatever.
you're like 21. Yeah.
Right. And but I have a pretty effective filter. I can meet someone and I can kind of get a sense fairly quickly of
Yes.
whether they're a person I want to invest my time
Yeah.
in. And that doesn't mean that everyone in my social circle is identical to me. Like I have a, you
No.
know, like it's but it's it's very much something that I just sort of feel that
Mhm.
I can get a sense of this is something if I want to move towards it or move away from it.
Yep.
If it feels right or if it doesn't feel right. That
Mhm.
wasn't always the case. And so I think you do kind of have to, like, you kind of have to be out of alignment in order to figure out what it looks
Yes.
like to be in alignment,
Yes.
where you
Like,
have,
in a car, you know when you're not. You don't always think like, "I'm so in alignment right now," like, but when you take your hands off the steering wheel and you start to go into the other lane, you're like, "Oh god," like, you're more aware when you're not, which
mhm,
then gives you more awareness in the hindsight of when you are because
right,
of the nots. So I think
right.
you do need both. Yes.
Yes. And for me, the Enneagram has been a really helpful tool for this. The Enneagram is a really ancient spiritual practice for spiritual transformation. And it has really kind of crystallized for me what all this looks like. And I won't go too much into it because then this would be three
A whole
hours
nother
long.
talk. Yes.
Um, but the Enneagram work for me has made me realize kind of when I'm in my personality or my game, like when I'm pulling my usual bullshit, which for me is a lot of I'm going to do lots of nice things for people so
Mhm.
that they like me.
Mhm.
That's my primary game. If I'm not,
Here, I made you cookies. Here's some
yeah,
flowers. I did this for you.
yeah. And you saw me back at our old job where I would like make these elaborate,
This
and some of
bitch
that was because
baked cakes like it was nobody's business. She would just bring cakes in all I mean, we were not mad about it, but, like, we were
yeah.
dealing with some vicarious trauma at that job. Like, she was like, "You want a lemon flavored blah, 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 blah cake that I had to search the ruins of Tibet for this one seed to make it." I'm like, "Who are you?" Like, in your Brooklyn apartment cooking up these things. So
Sometimes I genuinely enjoyed that, and sometimes
yeah.
it was like, oh my
Mhm.
god, like I have to do the best version of the thing so that they think this about me, or I have to do this thing so that then people know I care, or I have to, it's all of that
Yeah.
external noise. And so I think with Enneagram work, it's kind of like the idea is you can't transform doing just your usual bullshit. Like the
No.
answer for me, the answer for someone else may very well be do more nice things for
Nice
people.
things. Yeah.
Give
Bake
more.
cakes.
The answer for me is not that. The
Right.
answer for me is find ways to have more space for stillness and alone time
Mm. Yeah.
and bring up because I feel things in my gut. I
Yep.
feel my emotions and then I
Yeah.
act to support that feeling. What I need to do is I need to think because I'm not inclined to think and I forget
What
that.
about this? You're like, "I felt it. I didn't really think about it."
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And
yeah.
so if I really think about it, then I can kind of bring a more integrated, full presence to it.
Mhm.
And so a lot of it is that. Um, and I think when I'm out of alignment, for me, one of the things that comes up a lot is I get into comparison.
Mm.
So when I am out of alignment with my values or when I'm doing something that's not really coming from my truest self, I am looking at what everyone else is doing and
Yeah,
trying to match it in
yeah,
some way.
yep,
Some image of success that,
yeah.
right? It would look like, for example, kind of like a younger. you know, less Nora, who had grown less, would be like, oh my gosh, Alicia's doing all this amazing things with her coaching practice. And she's so on point. And like, I am just the crappiest therapist ever. And I have no direction. And what am I doing? Right. But
Right.
it's not.
It's like comparing apples and oranges because they're just totally different things, and you are doing tons of awesome stuff too, which I know you know, but just gonna highlight that.
Exactly. And now if I'm comparing myself a lot, I know I'm out of alignment with my values. If I am plagued by guilt about something,
Mm,
I used to live my life with like an undercurrent of guilt all the time. And there is a little bit of that, but the guilt of like, ooh, this is something that I'm like, guilt can show us a lot about our values, I think.
yes. Yep.
Guilt shows me what's important to me because it kind of shines a light on all of that. And that doesn't mean that the helpful orientation to the guilt is to become mired in it
Right.
or accept the truth that it's telling.
Right.
Like, oh man, I went out for drinks with my friends instead of being at home with my kids and I feel guilty about it. That's telling me that my relationship with my kids is important.
Yep.
It's not telling me that I shouldn't have gone out with my friends.
Right. Right. I actually just read, I'm reading a really good book by Liz Moody, 100 Ways to Change Your Life. So it's like bite-sized, like just
Mhm.
people she's interviewed and things. But the one I read this morning was about that, like how our emotions are information. And instead of avoiding them or judging them or whatevering them, using it as like a template. And often some of those really big, deeper emotions are a blueprint to then what is connected to that at the bottom. And even in
Mhm.
that moment, maybe it is like, oh, I really value time with my kids, and maybe like I need a little more quality time with them. Like, not that I couldn't choose this, but maybe I'm missing, and that's why I felt guilty. So, like, how can I add some of that in this weekend? Um,
Right.
Fear, guilt, anger, shame, like those ones are the best to listen to because they usually are connected to a core value, which then gives us information. Are we out of alignment? Was I not really aware of that? What's this filtering through? How do I reframe this? What do I do with it? Versus getting stuck in it or letting it take over, because all feelings are real, but they're not all facts. So
Right.
there's always like a hint of just like bullshit in every single one of those big ones, right? Like that we have
Yes.
to kind of like clear out
Yes.
to get to the good stuff. So
Yes, and there's such a different feeling in that kind of guilt that is directing you somewhere, and the kind of guilt that crosses over to shame and kind of when I'm
yeah,
coming home and I'm just stewing about something,
right.
right? And then it's like, "Oh, now I need to do something different." And a lot of times, like, when I'm I will put a big caveat in this that, like, I had a lot of postpartum anxiety crap after my first, and I was kept up at night for a lot of reasons for years that were largely related to that. Now, after the birth of my second, I have that under control thanks to doing a lot of things differently and it not being a pandemic and a
Yeah.
beautiful SSRI that is doing
Love
the
it.
work. And but now that that has been, I'm in a different place with all of that. Now I know if I'm being kept up at night by something, it's because there was something that went against my values. It's because
Yeah.
I actually need to think about, you know, okay, there's something that I should have done differently, or there's something that this person did that didn't
Yeah.
match up, or there's something that is pulling me outside of myself
Yeah.
and begging me to listen to it over here when that's not where I need to be.
Right.
Um, and so being kept up at night, comparing myself to other people, like a general sense of unease, or feeling like I can't be fully present.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
usually a big cue, I feel like, that we're out of alignment. If we're kind
Yeah.
of, you know,
Floating.
yeah,
Like, and the thing is, everything just feels really hard, but in a way where it feels impossible. Life is
mhm,
going to be challenging at times, but when we're in alignment and it's hard, it's like you're on that mile 18 and you're like, oh, this sucks. But I'm like, but I can do it versus like, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna sit down. Like I can then like something is not working right. Like life should never be that hard in the sense of, and again, obviously there's outliers, but like in the sense of that by your own making. We can't control the other stuff. Life sucks. You could be going through the worst things ever, but it also like when you still are finding those alignment pieces and those value pieces, there's still something that you can keep doing it with a little less fatigue versus the like like that's I think a sign too, especially for me when I'm like nothing is happening. It's
Yes.
like, okay, something is wrong. Like, let me reset. Like, this isn't a out here problem. This is a me problem. What do I
Yes.
need to kind of correct? So
Absolutely. And one of the things that my husband and I say a lot to each other, because we're both in helping professions, so we have a lot of outside forces begging for our care and attention, um, which we both love because we're both Enneagram 2. So if anyone's Enneagram fluent, then it's like meeting a need of ours, but it's
training.
also like the thing that we need to do less of. And
Yeah.
so one of the things we say a lot to each other when we're kind of noticing that things feel hard or that we're feeling overwhelmed, we kind of anchor ourselves in like, this is real life. Us in our home and our family together,
Mm,
our friendships, the people, like this is real life. The rest of it is just the stuff we do.
yeah.
And so kind of becoming ground when we're feeling overwhelmed and scattered,
Yeah. Coming
finding
back.
ways to reconnect. Yeah,
Right.
that.
I love that. We could probably talk about this forever, but I'm gonna wrap this up.
Yeah.
What any quick takeaways? I know you've said a lot, but is there any last like thought or takeaway and anything you want to promote, share, give to
Yeah.
people?
Yeah. So I guess quick takeaways are inner noise versus outside or inner, you know what I mean, inner self
Connection.
versus
Yeah.
outside noise. And once you kind of get that thing that has the ring of truth of like, oh, this is what's actually important to me. This is what's begging my attention, or this is what helps my heart feel
Okay.
inspired,
Yeah.
or however you conceptualize that. Like once you have that, moving towards that feeling
Mm,
can lead you to your values.
love
Um, and I think, just kind of getting curious about, how how why you show up the way you do and how that's been shaped by the world around you, right? Like
Yep.
I, as a woman, I was socialized to maybe embody a set of values that were not totally mine,
Yep.
right? And so if it feels contradictory, yeah, yeah. And then in terms of stuff to promote for anyone who's in the Louisville area, I will be facilitating a positive discipline parenting workshop
Mm,
on November 9th, along with a couple of my colleagues at the group private practice that I work with, called Creative Family Counseling. So I have a practice, a therapy practice, and I'm, seeing folks that way, but I'm also doing this positive discipline work. So for any parents or grandparents or aunties or people who have kids in their life who want to figure out how to really grow um, happy, healthy relationships with kids that encourage them to develop lifelong skills, you know,
yeah.
positive discipline, November 9th. And it's on the creativefamilycounseling.org website, but I'll also send you the link so that
Yeah.
you can,
It'll definitely be in you can click
yeah.
on and I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here, Nora. I'll definitely, maybe we'll revisit this topic again in the future. But thank you guys all for being here as well, and I will see you next week. Bye.